Hey guys, and welcome to our second lesson in this series around building a tech house beat. So to start off with, we have created our basic percussion pattern at this stage. Alright, so now if you're familiar with some of your other tech house DJs like Fisher, for example, you'd know that it's a bit of a blend of minimalism and detailed percussion, but a lot of the sound design comes down to a few core elements. And one of them is the bass line. Bass line is quite important. What we're going to be looking at is probably the most simple way to create a bass line within this particular style. So I'm going to turn off my search over here, and we're going to use this MIDI track here. Now, Ableton has this wonderful stock bass house sounding bass instrument. Okay, so under instruments, we're going to go up here and type in house. Now we're going to tab down, I think you can find it under a few of these. We're going to tab down operator, and then we have house bass. Now there's also big house bass, but I think house bass is the most stock standard one. We're going to drop this in on our MIDI track because it's a MIDI instrument. Now, going to click here, same way that we did with our 909 Core Kit program up here. Going to double click to create our MIDI region, turn off looping, and stretch it out for a couple of bars, probably a solid 4 bars. Now, if we follow our playhead down the bottom here, can see how long it'll take our bass line to play out. Right, so we've got a fair bit of time. We could probably program one bit of it and then loop it. But we run into a bit of an issue where if we don't know what our notes and such are, it makes it a little bit tricky to program in a bass line without knowing a bunch of music theory. We're going to shortcut this a little bit, all right? Because Ableton's a very clever program, and if you know how to use it correctly, it can make your life a heck of a lot easier, okay? So what we're going to do is, before we program in any MIDI information, we're going to tell it to only work within a particular scale, all right? Now, once again, there's a bunch of ways that you can go about this, but this is the most simplistic, straightforward way. What we're going to do is we're going to double click on house bass here, so this will bring up our instrument window, all right? What we're going to do is we're going to input a MIDI effect, okay? So a MIDI effect tells the instrument what notes can and can't be played, all right? Or how to play those particular notes based upon the information going into that, all right? Long story short, it cuts out a lot of mucking around down the line. So we're going to down tab scale, and then you can see under here, so we've gone MIDI effects, scale, and then we got a whole bunch of different scales, really. We're going to keep it super simple, all right? And we're going to work in minor, okay? This particular style generally works in minor keys. We're going to grab our C minor scale MIDI effect and drag it over to the left-hand side of our instrument, so we've got it here. Now, this tells us that we are in C minor. Cool. So anything we program in here now will be in C minor. If we want to, we can also change what the actual key of the song is going to be. It'll stay in minor, but we can change the bass up to C sharp, D, D sharp, or even E. So I'm going to have mine on E here, okay? And if you want to, you can hit fold. You double click in here, and that won't actually fold anything. Okay, cool. That's all right. Don't worry about hitting fold then. You can just set your bass note as to what you would like it to be on. Now, within here, you can, of course, have your MIDI keyboard hooked up. This will still work fine, and actually might work even better because your keys will now only play notes from that particular scale, right? You might notice if you press a couple of keys next to each other, they will produce the same note, all right? That way, essentially you can focus on the melodics of stepping it up or stepping it down. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to program in just a couple of notes. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to program in just a bunch of E notes like this. Now let's have a listen to this. Now that doesn't sound too bad for the octave range. I might try and shift it down an octave and see what that sounds like. So shift down a whole octave, you hold shift on your keyboard and press down. Yeah, so that sounds a bit too deep to me. So we're going to run with this. Now when it comes to instruments within Ableton, there's essentially an unlimited number of stuff that you can do, but everything comes down to a few key categories, being you can change the rhythm, the pitch, the tone of the instrument. All right, those are the three main sort of ones without getting into like all your effects and all that sort of stuff. And arguably that could come under tone as well. For our bass line, the first thing that I'm going to focus on is playing around with the rhythm, all right? Because without an interesting rhythm, your bass line will probably fall a bit flat, okay? Now, if you haven't had much experience with house-style bass lines, the best way to learn about different rhythms and such that they use is essentially to listen to a bunch of that sort of music, right? So fire up a couple of tunes from different house producers, just jump into YouTube or Spotify and have a bit of a listen, all right? Consume that sort of music. Start to get into a bit of a groove. Listen out for the patterns and the types of rhythms and melodies that they create, okay? For today, I'm going to attempt to create a rhythm that is probably a little bit more interesting than most. I want to use a combination of long notes, short notes, you know, and sort of make sure I've got a bit of space about it. So, tech house normally has some notes that are, you know, a bit more spaced out, a bit more, you know, they use a combination of nice long notes and then little fast runs. At this stage, I'm not focusing on pitch at all, purely the rhythm, all right? So I'm going to see how it also interacts with the drums that I've created up above. I've just done this entirely randomly, just trying to sit on my main beats and or the subdivisions of halves. So let's have a listen. Okay, so immediately with that little offbeat, I want to see if I can line this bass note up with that. Actually, I think I was off a little bit. I think it's earlier. Is it here? Okay, no, changed my mind. I want it on the downbeat. But that's okay, you know, you can play around with it. You can adjust things as you go. Nothing is fixed in stone. All right. Got a bit of a pattern happening here. Let's see what this sounds like. It might be a bit too busy now. I've gone to a smaller subdivision. No, that works all right. Let's see if I extend this note. Let's see about this. There we go. All right, so that's a little bit more interesting. Now, to start off with, I'm simply going to highlight all these notes, press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Now, the first step of playing around with my intervals and pitches is essentially going to be putting my whole bar's worth of notes on a different note, okay? And because you've already put the scale plugin on and set that up, there isn't going to be any incorrect sounding notes. So I'm going to simply highlight this whole bar, and I'm going to just press up a random number of times. Then I'm going to choose this one, press up another couple of times, then this one, I'm going to highlight and press down a couple of times. And we'll see what this bass line sounds like now altogether. Okay, already not bad. Tell you what, I'm going to leave that there for just for the sake of it. First thing I'm going to do now, just to play around with the pitch a little bit more, is see if I can create some what we call stepwise motion. All right. So I'm going to raise and lower a couple of notes so that they step between the solid bars where they're sitting. And let's have a listen to this now. Not bad. Sounded okay. I wasn't a big fan of that leap though. Let's see if I can fix that up. Now, I kind of wanted this to step up again to the next chord. Okay, cool. I also am hearing that I want this note a little bit shorter. I want a little bit more space there. And I want this to be a little bit lower. Let's hear this now. Let's lower it a little bit more, see what that sounds like. There we go. Now, I quite like that. Now that I've done that as a full MIDI clip, I can click, move it, drag it around. I can duplicate it out. Yeah, and play around with it even more. If I wanted to adjust the tone of the bass, we can do that by double-clicking the track here, and essentially just playing around with, the different settings in here, because the wonderful thing is that if you stuff it up, you can just reset it back, right? So don't be afraid to play around with these different things. So, for example, the first thing that I'm thinking of doing is adjusting this to a saw wave. And we can hear the difference there immediately. Let me solo the instrument by clicking S here. It's got a little bit more grip compared to the side. What about saw 16? Yeah, not bad. Don't know that I want that much. Oh, okay, yeah, here we go. And note, we've got 4 different oscillators actually going on here. So that's A, B, C, and D. So each time that you click on one of these, you're adjusting a completely different parameter. this one. What if we upload that to... Ooh. Right, and you can just play around with anything. Right, and if you ever end up going, oh no, I've ruined it, it sounds awful, you can just simply jump back into instruments, type house bass, drag it back on, and look, it's reset back to where it was. Now by dragging it across to here as well, we have a little bit of a lead in. Okay, so that's going to do it for this tutorial at the moment. You've got plenty to play around with there, including, you know, your notes. You can even change your key at this point. If you don't like where it's sitting, if you don't want it to be in whatever key, you can click Control A to highlight all, and then use your arrow keys to move it up and down and change what key you're in. Plenty of room there for creativity. All right, I'm going to leave it there. Hope you have a wonderful time. I'll see you in the next tutorial.